I still think it goes back to the gospel message and understanding really what our identity is, and I think me and Francis will hopefully flesh that idea out a little bit more as the night progresses.
So there's a special project that you've been working on for a couple of years. There's been a lot of buzz. It came out of Sundance Film Festival, and it is premiering very soon. It'll be in theaters opening here at the Sundance Kabuki in SF on October 4th, as well as Blue Light Cinemas in Cupertino, my hometown, October 4th. Tell us a little bit about Linsanity.
We started filming a documentary. It originally wasn't supposed to be a documentary, but we started when I was still with the Warriors, and everything happened, and we had a lot of footage, and then a year and a half ago, the whole Linsanity thing happened, and we were able to take the footage prior to it and combine it with the stuff we have after, and we decided to make the documentary. And I think to top it all off, I got a $25 million contract with the Houston Rockets, and you guys know how much I like to eat, so that comes out to 50 million apple pies. Someone really likes apple pie. As the 2012-2013 season started, I was supposed to be the cornerstone of the Houston Rockets rebuilding effort. I was supposed to be the new leader, the main guy to finally lead the Rockets back to the NBA playoffs. I was personally expecting to just come in, pick up where I left off, and I remember going on the plane ride over, and I was like, dude, I'm ready to invigorate the city of Houston. And when I got there, they had me on billboards across Houston, and I would drive by and be like, oh man, I look really cool. I was like doing some weird pose. But basically, it was all reminders that I was supposed to save Houston basketball. And the most important thing was I was ready to show everyone that Linsanity wasn't over. And but as I've seen many times in my life, what actually happened was nothing like what I had planned. First off, we signed James Harden. For those of you guys who don't know him, he's the guy with the big beard. He's my teammate. And when we signed him, I essentially went from kind of being the franchise player to kind of taking a back seat. And on top of that, I started the season playing terribly. Less than 10 games into the season, I started getting benched. And our backup point guards were playing more minutes than I was. And at this point in the season, my stats were significantly worse than the year before. The coaches were losing faith in me. Basketball fans were making fun of me. Journalists were criticizing me. And I remember I would go on Twitter, and my Twitter feed was filled with all types of hateful words, from overrated, overpaid, a flash in the pan, a bust, a nobody. That obviously didn't make me feel that great, and I became really, really frustrated, and I became really, really anxious. And on December 15th, 2012, I wrote in my diary, I have a diary. That's cool, diaries are amazing. I had a diary, and I said, I'm tired and weary, and I can't wait for the season to end, and it's just begun. I haven't been able to eat as much or sleep as well recently, just tossing and turning in anxiety. What if I lose my spot as a starter? What if I have to be a backup the rest of the season? What happens if my backups are actually better than me? And at this point, I became so obsessed with being a great basketball player, living up to the expectations, living up to the contract, and just being a starting point guard. I remember I became so obsessed with trying to be Linsanity, being this phenomenon that took the NBA and the world by storm. Linsanity was supposed to be a breakthrough of some sorts, where I went from being stuck on the end of the bench to being able to be free as an up-and-coming player on the court. And I remember Houston was supposed to be a fresh start for me. It was supposed to be a new beginning, a new journey. And I was supposed to be the go-to guy. But most of all, I was supposed to be joyful and free. But what I experienced was literally the opposite. I had no joy, and I felt no freedom. Because I felt chained to the world's lofty expectations. I felt like I had to carry the weight of the world on my own two shoulders. And that's why as I wrote in my diary, that's why I couldn't really sleep or eat. And I remember I was no fun to be around. I was never smiling. I was never free. And before a game, we were about to play the New Orleans Hornets. I remember in my hotel room, I just kind of broke down in tears because I was so anxious about losing my starting position as a point guard. And at that point, I really had to self-reflect and I had to ask myself, will I allow myself to listen to what everyone else has to say about me? Will I allow myself to be consumed by my performance on the court? To be consumed by my job? Because every day I was basing my self-worth on how many points I scored, or how many games I started. I was basing my self-esteem on my ability to be the player that everyone else expected me to be. But my identity should never have been in basketball in the first place. And this is when God showed me I really needed an identity check. So what did I have to do? First, I had to reprioritize my life. I told myself, I'm no longer going to listen to everyone else's voice. And in fact, I'm not even going to listen to my own voice. I had to get back to listening to God's voice. I had to get back to being who God made me to be. In other words, I had to return to my identity as one of God's children, rather than trying to be the insanity, which was an identity created by the world. So, my challenge to you today is this. Think about yourself. Who are you? What is your identity? That's why this event tonight is called Identity Unleashed. Because tonight, you need to find out what your identity is. And in order to know the answer to that question, you have to know what makes you the happiest or the most proud of yourself. You have to know what makes you the saddest or what makes you feel like you're not worth anything. You have to know what gives you your self-worth and your feeling of importance. For me, I couldn't find joy or feel important on any given day unless I played like an insanity. Unless I played well enough to drown out the voice of all the haters and to hear the praise of all my supporters. Everyone listens to a voice, and you need to know what voice you listen to. Because the voice you listen to the most is where your identity is. And so I want to ask you, whose voice do you hear the loudest in your life? It could be the voice of your peers, the voice of your parents, the voice of your boyfriend or your girlfriend. It could be the voice of your boss. Do you become extremely sensitive to criticism? Or do you become deflated when your boss critiques you or gives you a bad review? It could also be the voice of things that you want. It could be the voice of money, beauty, reputation, power. It could be the voice of your job or your schoolwork. Do you slave away at work or at school desperate to get that promotion or to get into that one college to be able to validate yourself as a person? Which voice is the loudest in your life? If the voice you listen to the most isn't God's voice, then eventually you experience the same emptiness, confusion, and misery that I felt when I listened to the voice of insanity. And so today, I want to quickly address 3 of the strongest voices in society. Number 1, money. Number 2, worldly success. Number 3, human approval. Because if your motivation and your heart is genuinely set on using everything you have for God's glory and not your own, then I'd say your identity is in Christ. I want you guys to think about God's blessings as if they come to us on a conveyor belt. So as we receive God's blessing, we pass them along to others. The Bible tells us to give because God first gave to us. As we receive God's love, we take that love, we pass it on to others. We love because God first loved us. As we receive money, we pass it on to others. But when we start storing up all these blessings, when we start storing up our money, when we start trying to hold on to every last thing, it creates a logjam on this conveyor belt. And everything starts to pile up. And not only are we not sharing God's blessings with others, but because we have so much stuff piled up, we can no longer see clearly. We can no longer see in front of us because our stuff is in the way. Our vision is clouded by our stuff. Our minds are consumed and our identities are put in our stuff. That's what happened to those 9 people in 1923, and that's what happened to me last season. This upcoming season might go great or it might go terribly. But either is okay, as long as I'm not consumed by basketball or the expectations of insanity. As long as I remember where my true identity is, and that's in Christ. So if you have money, find ways to use it to serve the poor, the underprivileged, the marginalized, the rejects of society, the people who everybody else has given up on, or find ways to serve the church. If you have worldly success, use it to glorify God. Use your fame, your work, your talents as a means to worship God and to inspire others to do so as well. That's what Tyler and the worship team did tonight. That's why they're here tonight. If you have human approval, use your friendships, your influence to proclaim the good news of Jesus or to humbly serve other people. That's why Francis Chan is here tonight. And if I could leave you guys with one thing, it would be to honestly evaluate your life, figure out what your purpose here on earth is, and to find out what your identity is in. And if it's not in God, I would strongly urge you to, at the very, very least, just find out what it means to put your identity in Him. Thank you.
Ha ha ha.